Do not move. The command came from somewhere behind Nora, but she could not tell who had spoken. Her hands trembled as she held the silver tray, her eyes fixed on the polished marble floor beneath her feet. She had learned long ago that looking up only brought trouble. Servants did not look at their betters. Omegas without wolves certainly did not look at royalty. And nobody, absolutely nobody, looked directly at the Alpha King. The grand ceremonial hall buzzed with anticipation. Hundreds of pack members filled the space, their excited whispers echoing off the vaulted ceilings decorated with ancient wolf motifs and battle scenes from the old wars. Today was the day, the selection ceremony. The day King Kieran Blackthorn would choose his future queen from among the most eligible she-wolves in all the territories. Nora kept her position against the far wall, barely breathing, praying she could remain invisible just a little longer. Being invisible was her only talent, the only thing that had kept her alive these past 5 years, since her own pack had rejected her and sold her into service at the royal palace. "Did you see Lady Vivian's dress?" someone whispered nearby. "Pure silk from the eastern territories. They say it cost more than a common wolf earns in 10 years. Nora did not need to look to know who they were talking about. Lady Vivian Ashford was impossible to miss. Tall, graceful, with cascading auburn hair and eyes like emeralds, she was the daughter of the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories. She was also cruel in ways that left no visible marks. Nora's ribs still ached from where Vivian had accidentally shoved her into a stone pillar 3 days ago. The music shifted, becoming deeper, more primal. The ceremonial drums began their ancient rhythm, and Nora felt it in her chest even though she had no wolf to respond to the call. That was her curse, the reason for her rejection. 23 years old, and never shifted. No wolf meant no mate bond, no connection to the pack consciousness, no future beyond servitude. Her mother had died in childbirth. Her father had looked at her with disappointment from her first breath until the day he traded her away like damaged goods. "He is coming," someone gasped, and the entire hall seemed to hold its breath collectively. Nora risked the smallest glance upward, just enough to see the massive doors at the far end of the hall swing open. King Kieran Blackthorn entered, and even from this distance, even with her broken Omega senses, Nora felt the wave of power that preceded him. He was not the largest alpha she had ever seen, but he carried himself with an authority that made size irrelevant. Dark hair, sharp features, eyes that some said could see straight through lies and into souls. He wore traditional ceremonial armor, black leather and silver clasps, each piece bearing the mark of the royal line. But it was not the king that made the crowd pull back slightly. It was the 3 wolves that walked beside him. They were enormous, each one larger than any natural wolf had a right to be. Their fur was midnight black, so dark it seemed to absorb the light around them. These were not ordinary pack wolves. Legend said they were bound to the king through ancient magic, that they were extensions of his will, that they had killed traitors and enemies without mercy. Nobody knew their names. Nobody dared ask. They simply existed as living embodiments of the king's power. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. The king walked down the center aisle, his wolves flanking him perfectly, their movements synchronized with his. The eligible she-wolves stood in a semicircle near the throne, each one dressed in their finest, each one desperately hoping to catch his attention. Vivienne stood in the center, her position a statement of confidence. She smiled, the kind of smile that looked warm from a distance but never reached her eyes. Nora shifted her weight slightly, her legs aching from standing so long. She had been on duty since before dawn, preparing the hall, ensuring every detail was perfect. After the ceremony, there would be a feast, and she would work until midnight, clearing plates and avoiding wandering hands and cruel comments. This was her life. This would always be her life. She had accepted it, or so she told herself during the long, lonely nights in the servants' quarters. The drums stopped. The silence that followed felt heavy, expectant. King Kieran reached his throne but did not sit. His gaze swept across the assembled she-wolves, his expression unreadable. "You know why you are here," he said, his voice carrying easily through the hall despite not being raised. There was something in that voice, something that made Nora's skin prickle with awareness. The kingdom requires a queen. The bloodline requires an heir. Tradition requires this. Ceremony. He paused, and Nora saw several of the she-wolves straighten, preening under his attention. But understand this. I will not choose based on beauty or politics, or which territory brings the largest dowry. I will choose the one my wolves accept. They have never been wrong. They will not be wrong now. A murmur ran through the crowd. This was unusual. Typically, the king would walk among the candidates, speak with them, allow them to demonstrate their worth through conversation and bearing. But to let the wolves choose, that was putting faith in something primal, something beyond political alliances and carefully arranged marriages. Vivian's smile widened. She had been preparing for this moment her entire life. She knew how to present herself, how to project strength and submission in equal measure, how to appeal to a predator's instincts. Nora watched as the king gestured forward, releasing the 3 wolves from their position at his side. They moved as one unit, padding silently across the marble floor. Every eye in the hall followed them. This was it, the moment that would determine the future of the kingdom. The first wolf approached Vivian. She lowered her eyes respectfully, tilted her head to expose her throat in a gesture of submission mixed with confidence. The wolf sniffed once, twice, then walked past her without pausing. Vivian's smile faltered. The second and third wolves did the same, barely acknowledging her presence before moving on. A collective intake of breath rippled through the crowd. The wolves moved down the line, past Lady Helena of the Western Territories, past Duchess Morgan, past every carefully selected candidate. Some they sniffed briefly, others they ignored entirely. None received more than passing attention. Nora could see confusion spreading across the king's face, a small crease forming between his brows. This had never happened before. The wolves always chose, always. Then, impossibly, all 3 wolves turned away from the semicircle of candidates. They turned toward the walls where the servants stood. They turned toward Nora. She stopped breathing. This could not be happening. She must have moved wrong, done something to draw attention. Servants who drew attention during royal ceremonies were punished. Her mind raced through everything she had done that morning. Had she missed cleaning something? Had she been standing in the wrong place? The wolves crossed the distance between the throne and the wall where she stood. Every step brought them closer, their massive forms moving with fluid grace. The crowd parted automatically, people pressing back against walls and pillars to give them space. Nora wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to disappear, to become invisible like she had learned to do. But her feet would not move. Her body had locked in place, frozen between terror and something else, something she could not name. The 3 wolves reached her. The silver tray slipped from her numb fingers, clattering against the marble floor with a sound like breaking glass. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The wolves sat. All 3 of them sat calmly at Nora's feet, their massive heads level with her waist, their dark eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her knees weak. One of them, the largest, pressed his head gently against her leg. Not aggressive, not threatening, almost affectionate. The silence that followed was deafening. Nora stood frozen as hundreds of eyes turned toward her, as the weight of the entire kingdom's attention landed on her shoulders like a physical thing. She could feel their stares, their confusion, their disbelief. She could feel the hatred already forming in some of those gazes. "What is the meaning of this?" Vivian's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Those are servants. That is nobody. She does not even have a wolf. The king moved. For the first time since entering the hall, King Kieran. Blackthorn moved with speed, crossing the distance between his throne and where Nora stood in seconds. His presence was overwhelming up close. She could smell leather and pine and something wild that made her head spin. She kept her eyes down, staring at the decorative clasps on his armor because looking at his face would surely kill her. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice low and meant only for her. She could not. She physically could not make her eyes obey. Years of training, of learning to be invisible, of understanding that eye contact with an alpha meant challenge or invitation, and she was not foolish enough to offer either. "I said, look at me." His hand came up, fingers gentle but firm under her chin, tilting her face upward. She had no choice but to meet his gaze. His eyes were amber, she realized, like honey held up to sunlight, like the moment between day and night when everything glows gold. And in those eyes, she saw confusion that matched her own, saw questions that had no answers, saw something that looked almost like recognition even though they had never spoken, had never even been in the same room before today. "What is your name?" he asked. Her mouth was dry. Words stuck in her throat like stones. "Nora," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nora Bennett, Your Majesty. Nora Bennett." He repeated her name slowly, as if testing how it felt. The largest wolf made a low sound, not quite a growl, not quite a whine. Kieran glanced down at his wolves, and something passed between them. Some communication Nora could not interpret. When he looked back at her, his expression had changed. The confusion was still there, but underneath it was something harder, something that looked like determination. "How long have you worked in the palace?" "5 years, Your Majesty." "And in all that time, have you ever been near my wolves before?" She shook her head. "No, Your Majesty. I was told to stay away from them. Everyone was told to stay away from them. Yet here they are." He gestured to the 3 massive animals sitting peacefully at her feet. "Here they are, choosing you over every eligible she-wolf in the kingdom, choosing a servant, choosing someone who should not even register to their senses." He paused, and she saw him considering something, weighing options she could not guess at. "Tell me, Nora Bennett, do you have any idea why they would do this?" The honest answer was no. The truthful answer was that nothing about. This made sense, that she was terrified and confused, and certain this would end badly for her somehow. But before she could form any response, Vivian's voice rang out again, louder this time, filled with barely contained fury. "This is absurd. She must have done something, used some trick, some scent, some manipulation. Everyone knows she is wolfless. She cannot possibly be a suitable mate for the king. This ceremony is a mockery." Murmurs of agreement rippled through some parts of the crowd, though others remained silent, watching with hungry curiosity to see how this unprecedented situation would resolve. The king did not take his eyes off Nora. "My wolves have never been wrong," he said, his voice carrying through the hall. "Not once in 10 years have they chosen incorrectly. They sense things we cannot. They know things we do not." He paused, and Nora saw the corner of his mouth quirk slightly. "It seems they have made their choice very clear. But she is nobody." Another voice called out, this one belonging to Lord Marcus, one of the Northern Territories' council members. "No lineage, no pack, no wolf. Surely Your Majesty cannot be considering." "What I consider is my concern." Kieran cut him off, his tone sharp enough to end any further objection instantly. He turned back to Nora, and she saw him studying her with new intensity, as if trying to see past the servant's uniform and years of practiced invisibility to something underneath. "Can you shift?" he asked. Quietly. No, Your Majesty. I never have. Have you tried? Many times. It never works. I am told my wolf is dormant or absent entirely. Something flickered in his eyes at that. Dormant is not the same as absent, he said, almost to himself. Then, louder, addressing the crowd. The ceremony is concluded. The wolves have chosen. Whatever that means, whatever comes next, we will discover together. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. Chaos erupted. Voices rose in protest and shock, people pushing forward and back, trying to process what had just happened. Nora stood in the center of it all, the three wolves still calmly seated at her feet like ancient guardians. The king still close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. This was impossible. This was a mistake. This would get her killed. She knew it with absolute certainty. And yet, when one of the wolves pressed against her leg again, she felt something stir deep inside. Her. Something that had been sleeping for so long, she had forgotten it existed. Something that whispered, "Finally, finally, finally." The king's hand was still under her chin. His thumb brushed across her jaw, a touch so gentle it seemed impossible from someone with such power. "Do not be afraid," he said, though his eyes suggested he knew how useless that command was. "Whatever you are, whoever you are, my wolves see it. And what they see, I will uncover." Nora wanted to ask what that meant. Wanted to demand answers, to understand why this was happening, to have some control over a situation that had spun so far beyond her comprehension. She felt like she was drowning. But before she could speak, Vivian pushed through the crowd. Her beautiful face twisted with rage, barely concealed beneath a veneer of concern. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Surely you see this cannot stand. The council will never accept it. The territories will revolt. This girl has no training, no education, no understanding of what it means to stand beside a king. She cannot even shift. How can she be expected to bear strong heirs, to lead in times of war, to do any of the things a queen must do?" Every word was a knife, and Vivian knew exactly where to place them for maximum damage. Nora felt herself shrinking inside, felt all her old insecurities rising up to confirm what the she-wolf was saying. Of course this was wrong. Of course she was inadequate. She had always been inadequate. That was her defining characteristic. The king's jaw tightened. "Lady Vivian," he said, his tone formal and cold. "I appreciate your concern for the kingdom. However, I do not recall asking for your opinion on this matter." Vivian's eyes flashed, but she dipped her head in forced deference. "Of course, Your Majesty. I only wish to serve the kingdom's best interests." "Then you will serve by accepting what has happened here today, and supporting the decision my wolves have made." He released Nora's chin and stepped back slightly, though his body language remained protective, positioned between her and the crowd. "This ceremony is over. Everyone is dismissed. The feast will proceed as planned. Nora Bennett will be moved to the royal wing immediately." A fresh wave of whispers erupted. The royal wing. That was where the king's personal quarters were located, where his most trusted advisors resided, where visiting royalty stayed. It was not where servants belonged. Nora's mind reeled. This was moving too fast. Everything was moving too fast. She needed to think, to understand, to figure out what was happening to her. "Your Majesty," she started, her voice shaking. "I do not understand. I do not know why they chose me. I do not know what you expect me to—" "I expect nothing," he interrupted, his voice gentler now. "Not yet. First, we discover why 3 wolves bound by ancient magic have decided that a supposedly wolfless Omega is worthy of their. Then we determine what comes next." He gestured to someone in the crowd, and a woman stepped forward. She was middle-aged, with kind eyes, and the bearing of someone used to authority. "This is Margaret, head of the palace household. She will see to your needs, help you settle into new quarters, provide whatever you require. Margaret approached with a warm smile that seemed genuine, unlike so many of the expressions Nora had encountered in the palace over the years. Come along. Dear, she said, her tone motherly. Let us get you out of this chaos. But as Nora moved to follow, the three wolves stood as one and followed her. Not the king. Her. They walked behind her like an honor guard, their presence parting the crowd more effectively than any command could have. People stared. People whispered. Nora caught glimpses of faces as she passed, some curious, some envious, some openly hostile. She saw Vivian's expression of pure hatred, saw the calculating look in Lord Marcus's eyes, saw a dozen other reactions she could not begin to interpret. The walk through the palace felt surreal. These were halls she had cleaned 1,000 times, always invisible, always insignificant. Now she walked through them, with 3 legendary wolves at her back, and everyone staring. It felt like a dream, or a nightmare. She could not decide which. Margaret led her to a suite of rooms that took Nora's breath away. High ceilings, enormous windows overlooking the mountain ranges. Beyond the palace, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum rather than a bedroom. There was a sitting room with a fireplace large enough to stand in, a bedroom with a bed that could fit 5 people, a bathing chamber with a stone tub carved from a single piece of marble. I cannot stay here, Nora said immediately. This is too much. There has been some mistake. The king does not make mistakes, Margaret replied firmly but kindly. And his wolves certainly do not. Whatever the reason, dear, you are meant to be here. Now let us get you cleaned up and into something more appropriate than a servant's uniform. The feast begins in 2 hours. The wolves had followed them inside, and now arranged themselves around the room, each taking a position that allowed them to watch both Nora and the door. They showed no signs of leaving. Will they always... Nora gestured vaguely at the massive animals. Will they always follow me now? Margaret smiled. It appears so. They have bonded with you. That is extraordinarily rare. Most wolves only bond with the king himself. For them to choose someone else, to choose you. She trailed off, studying Nora with new interest. There is more to you than meets the eye, child. Of that I am certain. After Margaret left, promising to return with appropriate clothing and someone to help her prepare for the feast, Nora found herself alone for the first time since the ceremony. Alone except for 3 giant wolves at least. She moved to the window, looking out at the mountains in the distance. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It was beautiful. She had never taken time to notice beauty before. There had been no point when every moment was consumed with survival. One of the wolves approached, the largest one that had first pressed against her leg. Up close, she could see his eyes were not pure black as she had thought, but a very dark gray, almost silver in certain lights. He sat beside her, his shoulder level with her hip, radiating warmth and something else. Something that felt almost like comfort. Tentatively, hardly believing her own daring, Nora reached out and placed her hand on his head. His fur was surprisingly soft, thick, and warm. He leaned into her touch, making that low sound again, and something inside Nora's chest twisted painfully. When was the last time anyone had allowed her touch without flinching away? When was the last time she had felt wanted instead of tolerated? Why did you choose me? She whispered to the wolf. I am nobody. I have nothing to offer. I will only disappoint everyone. The wolf looked up at her with those intelligent gray eyes, and Nora had the strangest sensation that he understood, that he was trying to communicate something she could not quite grasp. Then she felt it. A flutter inside her chest, like a bird trying to escape a cage. A warmth that spread through her veins, unfamiliar and startling. her breath caught. What? The sensation faded as quickly as it had come, leaving her gasping and confused. The wolf pressed closer, and the other two moved in as well, surrounding her with their presence. It should have felt threatening. Instead, it felt protective. Safe. For the first time in 5 years, Nora felt safe. She sank down to the floor, her legs unable to support her anymore, and the wolves adjusted with her, creating a circle of fur and warmth around her. Tears came then, unexpected and overwhelming. She had not cried in years. Crying accomplished nothing except making her face blotchy and her nose run. But now the tears came anyway, releasing pressure she had not known she was carrying. Margaret returned to find her on the floor, surrounded by wolves, crying silently into midnight black fur. The older woman did not comment on the tears, simply helped Nora to her feet with gentle efficiency and guided her toward the bathing chamber. The wolves remained in the bedroom, apparently content to give her some privacy now that Margaret was present. The bath was hot and scented with oils Nora could not identify. As she sank into the water, she tried to process everything that had happened in the span of a single hour. This morning, she had been invisible. Now she was staying in royal quarters, bonded to magical wolves, and apparently expected to attend a feast as a guest rather than a servant. It was too much. Her mind could not hold it all. After the bath, Margaret helped her into a dress that must have cost more than Nora had earned in her entire 5 years of service. Deep blue silk that shimmered when she moved, with delicate silver embroidery along the neckline and sleeves. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her, though Margaret explained it had been adjusted hastily from the palace stores. "You clean up beautifully," Margaret said, stepping back to admire her work. Nora looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. The dress transformed her, made her look like she belonged in these rooms, like she could be someone other than what she had always been. But it was still just a dress. Underneath, she was still the same broken Omega with no wolf and no prospects. "I do not know how to be what they expect," she said quietly. "Nobody knows how to be anything until they learn," Margaret replied. "You will figure it out, and you have advantages others do not." "What advantages?" "You have the wolves' loyalty. You have the king's attention. And unless I am very wrong, you have something inside you that is waiting to wake up. Those are considerable advantages, dear. Use them wisely." The feast was even more overwhelming than the ceremony. The great dining hall was filled with long tables laden with food Nora had only ever prepared but never tasted. Hundreds of pack members filled the space, their voices creating a constant roar of conversation. And at the head of it all sat King Kieran Blackthorn with an empty chair beside him. That chair was meant for her. Everyone knew it. Every eye tracked Nora as she entered, the 3 wolves still faithfully at her side. The weight of attention was suffocating. She wanted to run, to hide, to return to the servants' quarters, where at least she knew her place. But the wolves kept moving forward, gently herding her toward the high table, and she had no choice but to follow where they led. Kieran stood as she approached, a gesture of respect that made the already quiet hall fall completely silent. "Lady Nora," he said formally, and she nearly laughed at the absurdity of that title. "Please, sit." The chair was comfortable. The view from the high table showed her the entire hall, all those faces turned toward her with expressions ranging from curiosity to confusion to outright hostility. Vivian sat at a lower table, her posture perfect, her face a mask of composure that did not quite hide the fury burning in her eyes. "You do not have to stay if you are uncomfortable," Kieran said quietly, leaning slightly toward her. "I can have food brought to your quarters." "Would that not make me appear weak?" Nora asked, surprising herself with the question. A slight smile crossed his face. "Possibly, but strength is not always found in enduring discomfort for the sake of appearances." "Then everyone here is weak," she replied, gesturing subtly at the room. Because I assure you, everyone is uncomfortable right now. He actually laughed at that, genuine sound that seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised her. You are not wrong, he admitted. Very well. We endure together then. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. The feast proceeded with painful slowness. Nora picked at her food, unable to eat much despite how delicious everything looked. People approached the high table periodically, offering congratulations that sounded hollow, or asking questions that felt like traps. She let Kieran handle most of the conversation, responding only when directly addressed, keeping her answers brief and non-committal. But she watched. She observed. She noticed who congratulated them and who avoided eye contact. She noticed which territory leaders looked concerned and which looked calculating. She noticed that Vivian left halfway through the feast without a word, her exit marked by a swirl of silk and barely contained rage. You are observant, Kieran commented during a brief lull. I have learned to be. Survival required it. What else has survival taught you? She considered the question. That most people reveal their true intentions through small actions rather than grand gestures. That patience is often more valuable than courage. That sometimes the best response is no response at all. He studied her with those amber eyes, and she felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the dress or the public attention. You are not what I expected, he said finally. What did you expect? I do not know. But not someone who speaks with such clear-eyed pragmatism. Not someone who observes and analyzes rather than simply reacting. He paused. Tell me, Nora Bennett, what do you want from all this? The question caught her off guard. What did she want? She had spent so long focused on survival that she had never allowed herself to want anything beyond basic safety. I want to understand why this is happening, she said honestly. I want to know why the wolves chose me. She stopped, unsure if she should voice the rest. Go on. I want to know if I am broken or if there is something in me that I have never been able to reach. I want to know if I could have had a different life, a different future, if circumstances had been different. She met his gaze directly for the first time by choice rather than command. I want to matter, even if only for a little while. Something shifted in his expression, softening slightly. You matter, he said quietly. The wolves have seen to that. What remains to be seen is in what capacity and for how long. It was honest, at least. No false promises, no platitudes. She appreciated that more than he probably knew. The feast finally ended near midnight. Nora's feet ached in the delicate shoes Margaret had provided, and exhaustion pulled at her like a physical weight. The wolves escorted her back to her new quarters, with Kieran walking alongside, apparently content to ensure she arrived safely. Tomorrow things will begin in earnest, he said as they reached her door. There will be questions. Tests, possibly. The council will want to understand what happened today. I will want to understand it. But tonight, rest. You have earned it. She wanted to argue that she had done nothing to earn anything, but she was too tired. Instead, she simply nodded and reached for the door handle. His hand covered hers, stopping her. The touch sent an unexpected jolt through her, warm and electric. Nora, he said, and there was something in the way he spoke her name that made her breath catch. I do not know what the wolves saw in you, but I intend to find out, and I suspect when we do, it will change everything. He released her hand and stepped back, leaving her standing in the doorway, her heart racing for reasons she could not explain. The wolves followed her inside, taking up their positions around the room as if they had always belonged there. Nora changed out of the beautiful dress, hanging it carefully despite knowing she would probably never wear it again. She crawled into the enormous bed, feeling small and lost in its vast comfort. Sleep should have come easily after such an exhausting day. Instead, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every moment. The ceremony, the wolves, the king's touch, that strange flutter in her chest. What did it all mean? One of the wolves, the largest one, jumped onto the bed despite its massive size. He settled beside her, his warmth seeping through the blankets, his presence somehow comforting rather than alarming. Nora reached out, resting her hand on his back, feeling his breathing slow and steady. "What am I?" she whispered into the darkness. The wolf did not answer, of course. But somewhere deep inside, in that place where she had always felt empty and broken, something stirred again. That same flutter, that same warmth. Like something waking up after a very long sleep. Like something recognizing that conditions were finally right for emergence. Nora closed her eyes and let herself drift, unaware that in various parts of the palace, other people were also lying awake, making plans that would affect her future. Vivian sat in her chambers, her hands clenched into fists, her mind calculating revenge. Lord Marcus convened a secret meeting with other council members, discussing how to handle this unexpected disruption to their carefully laid plans. And King Kieran Blackthorn stood at his window, looking out at the mountains, thinking about a servant girl who spoke like a philosopher and had somehow earned his wolves' absolute devotion, wondering what secrets lay hidden beneath years of forced invisibility. The next morning arrived too soon. Nora woke to find Margaret already in her chambers, organizing another dress, this one simpler but still far finer than anything she had ever worn. "The king has requested your presence for breakfast," Margaret announced, cheerfully. "And after that, you will meet with the royal physician." "Why?" Nora asked, sitting up carefully so as not to disturb the wolf still sleeping beside her. "Standard procedure for anyone joining the royal household. Just routine examinations, dear. Nothing to worry about." But Nora worried anyway. What would a physician discover? Would they find evidence of her brokenness, proof that she did not belong here? Would this be how it all ended, with medical documentation of her inadequacy? The breakfast was a private affair, thankfully. Just Kieran, Nora, and the three wolves in a small dining room filled with morning light. It felt strangely domestic, almost normal, despite the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. "Did you sleep well?" Kieran asked as she sat down. "Eventually," she answered honestly. "The bed is very comfortable. Unfamiliar, but comfortable. You will adjust." He poured tea for both of them, a surprisingly mundane action from a king. "Today will bring new challenges. The royal physician, as you have heard. After that, the council will want to meet you. They will have questions." "What should I tell them?" "The truth. You know nothing more than they do about why this happened." He paused, studying her over his teacup. "Unless you have remembered something? Any detail? Any moment from your past that might explain why 3 magically bound wolves would choose you over every eligible she-wolf in the kingdom?" Nora thought back. Through her life, but there was nothing extraordinary to find. Just years of rejection and service, of learning to be small and invisible, of surviving rather than living. "No," she said, "there is nothing. I am nobody from nowhere, with no lineage worth mentioning and no gifts worth noting. My wolves disagree. Your wolves may be mistaken." She said it before she could stop herself, then froze, expecting anger at her contradiction. Instead, Kieran smiled slightly. "They are never mistaken. Which means there is something about you that everyone, including you yourself, has missed." He leaned forward, his expression intense. "I have spent the morning researching dormant wolves. Did you know that in ancient times, some wolves would remain dormant for years, even decades, waiting for the right catalyst to emerge? What kind of catalyst? Danger, love, true need, the return to a place of power, any number of things." He paused. "Or in some cases, the presence of a true mate." Words hung in the air between them. Nora's heart stuttered. True mates are rare, she said carefully. Almost mythical. And yet they exist. The mate bond is real, even if uncommon. He stood, moving to the window. When I touch you, do you feel anything unusual? The question was direct, almost clinical. But Nora remembered the jolt when his hand had covered hers last night. The way her breath had caught, the warmth that had spread through her. I am not sure, she hedged. I have never been touched by an Alpha King before. I do not know what is usual and what is not. He turned back to face her. Let me ask differently. When I touch you, does it feel like anything you have experienced before? She should lie. She should protect herself, maintain distance, not let him see how his proximity affected her. But something in his expression, some vulnerability barely visible beneath his usual authority, made her choose honesty instead. No, she admitted quietly. It feels different. Stronger. Like electricity and warmth combined. But that could be nerves or fear, or simply the strangeness of all this. He crossed back to the table, moving slowly, deliberately. When he reached her chair, he extended his hand. May I? She nodded, unable to find words. His fingers wrapped around hers, gentle but firm, and that sensation flooded through her again. Not pain, not fear. Something else entirely. Something that made her wolf, the wolf she had never had, suddenly feel very close, very present, very real. Kieran's eyes widened slightly. You feel it too, he said, not a question but a statement. The bond trying to form. I do not have a wolf to bond with, she protested weakly. Your wolf is there. I can sense it now, closer than before. My presence is drawing it out. He pulled her gently to her feet, his other hand coming up to cup her face. This is going to sound insane, but I think you are my true mate, Nora. I think that is why the wolves chose you. They recognized what I could not see through all the protocols and expectations. That is impossible, she whispered. But even as she said it, she felt the truth of his words resonating through her. You are a king. I am nothing. True mates are supposed to be equals, balanced in power and status. True mates are balanced in ways that matter, he corrected. Not status or power, but essence, soul. Whatever it is that makes us who we are beneath all the external trappings. He was so close now, she could count the gold flecks in his amber eyes. She could feel his breath on her face, could smell pine and leather and something uniquely him. Part of her wanted to run. The larger part wanted to lean into this impossible connection, to let it carry her wherever it led. I am afraid, she admitted. Good, he said softly. So am I. This complicates everything. The council, the politics, the carefully planned alliances. If you truly are my mate, if this bond completes. He did not finish the sentence, but she understood. If they bonded completely, he could not marry for political advantage. He would be bound to her, a nobody Omega with no pack and no status. It would be a disaster for the kingdom. We should stop this, she said, even as her body leaned toward him. We should maintain distance, prevent the bond from forming fully. You need a queen who can help you rule, not a servant who knows nothing of politics or leadership. What I need and what I want are not always the same. Thing. His thumb traced along her jawline, sending shivers down her spine. And what the fates have decided matters more than what the council prefers. Before she could respond, before she could think through all the reasons this was a terrible idea, he kissed her. It was gentle at first, questioning, giving her space to pull away if she wanted. She did not want. She kissed him back, rising on her toes to close the small distance between them, her hands finding their way to his shoulders, his chest, anywhere she could reach. The world tilted. That flutter in her chest became a roar, became a presence demanding recognition. Heat flooded through her, power she had never felt, never imagined she could contain. And beneath it all, something else stirred. Something that had teeth and fur, and had been waiting so very long to be acknowledged. Kieran pulled back suddenly, his eyes wide. "Your eyes," he breathed. "Nora, your eyes just flashed gold." She blinked, disoriented, still caught in the sensations flooding through her. "What?" "Gold, like a wolf's eyes during a shift. Your wolf is there, Nora. She is waking up." The door burst open. Margaret stood in the doorway, her expression urgent. "Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but the council has called an emergency meeting. They demand to speak with you immediately. Lady Vivian has filed a formal complaint, claiming impropriety and requesting that yesterday's ceremony be invalidated." Kieran's jaw tightened. "Of course. She has." He looked at Nora, conflict clear in his expression. "I have to go, but this conversation is not finished. Tonight we will talk properly, away from interruptions and politics." Nora nodded, still trying to process what had just happened. Her wolf. She had a wolf. It was there. She had felt it, and Kieran had seen evidence of it. Everything she had believed about herself, every certainty about her brokenness, had just been shattered. After he left, Margaret helped her prepare for the physician's appointment, chattering about inconsequential things. But Nora barely heard. She was too busy focusing inward, trying to sense what she had felt during that kiss, trying to find that presence again. It was there, faint but real. A consciousness that was not quite her but not quite separate either. A wolf, dormant for 23 years, finally beginning to stir. The royal physician was a stern older man named Dr. Aldrich, who examined her with clinical efficiency. He checked her eyes, her reflexes, listened to her heart, drew blood for testing. Through it all, he maintained a professional detachment that was somehow more comforting than false friendliness would have been. "You are healthy," he announced finally. "Remarkably so, actually, considering your history of service work. No deficiencies, no weaknesses. Strong bone structure, excellent cardiovascular health." He paused, studying her with new interest. "And, unless I am very wrong, signs of an emerging shift. Your hormone levels are beginning to spike in ways consistent with a first transformation." "But I am 23, Nora protested. "The first shift happens in adolescence or not at all." "Usually," he agreed. "But there are documented cases throughout history of late bloomers. Wolves suppressed by trauma, by circumstance, by magic. Wolves waiting for the right conditions." He made notes in his records. "I will want to monitor you closely over the next few weeks. The first shift at your age could be complicated, dangerous even, if not properly managed." Dangerous. Of course it would be dangerous. Nothing in her life had ever been simple or easy. Why would this be any different? That afternoon, while Kieran dealt with the council and their concerns, Nora found herself back in her quarters, restless and uncertain. The wolves remained with her, their presence constant and comforting. She tried to rest, to process everything that had happened in the past 24 hours, but her mind would not settle. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. She opened it to find a young woman about her own age, with kind brown eyes and an uncertain smile. "I am sorry to intrude," the woman said. "I am Cassandra. I work in the palace archives. I heard about what happened at the ceremony and I thought you might want to know something." "Know what?" "May I come in?" Nora stepped aside, letting her enter. Cassandra looked around the luxurious quarters with wide eyes, before turning back to Nora. "I have been researching your family name. Bennett. It is not common in these territories, and I was curious about its origin." I do not know much about my family, Nora admitted. My mother died when I was born. My father never spoke of his lineage. That is because his lineage was deliberately hidden. Cassandra pulled out a roll of old parchment. I found this in the restricted archives. Records from 50 years ago, when territories were reorganized after the Great War. Nora took the parchment carefully. The writing was faded but readable. Lists of names, pack associations, territory assignments. And there, near the bottom, she found it. Bennett, affiliated with the Silver Moon Pack. Status, royal bloodline, denounced and exiled. Royal bloodline? She breathed. The Silver Moon Pack was one of the most powerful packs before the war, Cassandra explained. Their alpha line was considered sacred, blessed by the moon goddess herself. But during the war, there was a schism. Some of the Silver Moon wolves chose the wrong side. After the war ended, they were stripped of their status, exiled, forbidden from claiming their heritage. She pointed to the notation beside the Bennett name. Your grandfather was a Silver Moon prince, which makes you nothing, Nora finished firmly. Even if this is true, denounced royalty is not royalty. It is shame and exile. But the bloodline remains, Cassandra insisted. And bloodlines matter, especially royal bloodlines. The power does not disappear just because someone declares it invalid. It goes dormant, waiting for the right conditions to reemerge. Dormant. That word again. Nora's mind raced, connecting pieces. A dormant royal bloodline. A dormant wolf. The king's wolves recognizing something in her that nobody else could see. A mate bond trying to form with the current alpha king. It was too much. Too coincidental. Unless it was not coincidence at all, but something like fate. Like destiny. Like all those things she had stopped believing in years ago. Why are you telling me this? She asked Cassandra. Because information is power, the younger woman replied. And because I think you are going to need every advantage you can get. Lady Vivian and her allies will not accept this easily. They will look for ways to discredit you, to prove you are unworthy. But if you have royal blood, even denounced royal blood, it changes the argument. After Cassandra left, Nora sat with the parchment in her hands, staring at her family name written in faded ink. Silver Moon Pack. Royal bloodline. It should mean something. Maybe it did mean something. But it did not change who she had been for 23 years. It did not erase the rejection, the service, the invisibility. A bloodline was just ancestry. It was not identity. Not unless she chose to make it so. Evening fell, and still Kieran did not return. Nora ate a solitary dinner, picked at by nerves, then stood at the window watching the sky darken. The mountains in the distance looked different at night, mysterious and somehow protective, like ancient guardians watching over the palace. She was so lost in thought that she did not hear the door open behind her, did not realize she was no longer alone until strong arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against a familiar chest. I am sorry. Kieran's voice rumbled against her ear. The council session lasted hours. They have many concerns about yesterday's events. What did you tell them? That my wolves have never been wrong, and I will not question their judgment now. His grip tightened slightly. I also told them that we are investigating the situation, trying to understand what happened, and that until we have answers, they will treat you with the respect due to someone under my personal protection. Did they accept that? They had no choice. I am still their king, regardless of how much they might wish otherwise in this moment. He turned her around to face him, and she saw exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of ruling visible in a way it had not been before. But they are right to have concerns. This is unprecedented, dangerous even. If you truly are my mate, if we bond completely, it will shift power dynamics throughout all the territories. Then perhaps we should not bond. Nora said, even though the words hurt to speak. Perhaps we should maintain distance. Let the connection fade before it becomes permanent. Is that what you want? She thought about lying, thought about being noble and self-sacrificing, about putting the kingdom's needs above her own desires. But when had nobility ever protected her? When had self-sacrifice ever earned her anything but more pain? No, she admitted, I do not want that. But what I want does not matter compared to what the kingdom needs. You are wrong. He cupped her face in both hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. What you want matters immensely. What you need matters. You have spent your entire life believing otherwise, making yourself small and invisible to survive. But you do not have to do that anymore. I do not know how to be anything else, she confessed, and felt tears threatening again. I do not know how to take up space, how to matter, how to be someone worth choosing. Then let me teach you. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. Gentle kisses that felt like promises. Let me show you what I see when I look at you. Not a servant, not an omega without status. I see strength that has been tested and not broken. I see intelligence that has been forced to hide itself. I see beauty that has been overlooked because people only saw what they expected to see. He kissed her lips then, deeper than before, and that heat flooded through her again. The wolf inside her rose to meet it, pressing forward, demanding recognition. Nora gasped, pulling back. Something is happening, she managed. I can feel it. The wolf. She wants out. Let her, Kieran encouraged. Do not fight it. Your body knows what to do, even if your mind does not. I am scared. I know, but I am here. And my wolves are here. We will not let you face this alone. The transformation began without her permission. Her body making decisions her mind could not control. Pain lanced through her, sharp and overwhelming. Her bones shifted, restructuring themselves in ways that should be impossible. She cried out, and Kieran caught her, lowering them both to the floor, holding her through the agony. The three wolves surrounded them, their presence somehow helping, easing the worst of the pain through means she could not understand. Breathe, Kieran commanded. Through the pain. Let it happen. She tried. Gods, she tried. But it hurt so much, and the fear was nearly as overwhelming as the pain. What if she was doing it wrong? What if something broke that could not be fixed? What if she ended up trapped between forms, neither human nor wolf, but some horrible combination of both? Look at me, Kieran demanded, his voice cutting through her panic. Nora, look at me. Trust your body. Trust your wolf. She has been waiting for this moment her entire life. She knows what to do. The pain peaked, became unbearable, and then suddenly broke. Nora found herself on 4 legs instead of 2, looking up at Kieran from a drastically different perspective. She was smaller than his wolves, but not as small as she had feared. Her fur was silver white, gleaming in the lamplight. Beautiful. She was beautiful. Kieran stared at her with wonder. Silver moon, he breathed. That is your pack heritage, is not it? The Silver Moon Pack. I heard rumors that line still existed somewhere, but I never thought. He reached out slowly, letting her sniff his hand before running his fingers through her fur. You are magnificent. His 3 wolves approached, sniffing her carefully, and to Nora's surprise, they bowed their heads slightly, showing respect, acknowledging her as something important, something worthy. The shift back was easier, though still painful. When Nora finally returned to human form, she collapsed against Kieran, shaking and exhausted. I did it, she whispered. I actually shifted. You did. His voice was full of pride and something else, something deeper. Your wolf is perfect, and she confirms what I already suspected. You are not just any Omega, Nora Bennett. You are royalty. Exiled, hidden, but royalty, nonetheless. Denounced royalty, she corrected weakly. That parchment Cassandra showed me made it clear. My grandfather's line was stripped of status. Status can be restored, especially when the current Alpha King desires it. He helped her to her feet, supporting her weight when her legs threatened to give out. This changes everything. The council cannot object to a mate bond with someone of royal blood, even exiled royal blood. The politics shift in our favor. But Vivian will have to accept it. She has no choice now. He guided her toward the bed, helping her lie down. Rest. Your first shift takes enormous energy. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but tonight, you have earned peace. He moved to leave, but Nora caught his hand. Stay, she said. Please. I do not want to be alone. Something flickered in his eyes. If I stay, Nora, I do not know if I can maintain the distance I should. The mate bond is pulling at me, demanding completion. My control is not infinite. Then maybe we should stop trying to control it, she said, surprising herself with her boldness. Maybe we should accept what the fates have decided. You do not know what you are asking. I know exactly what I am asking. She held his gaze steadily. I have spent 23 years letting others make decisions about my life, my future, my worth. For once, I want to choose. I want to decide. And I choose this. I choose you. For a long moment, he did not move. Then, with a sound between a growl and a sigh, he kicked off his boots and joined her on the bed, pulling her against his chest. You will be the death of me, he murmured against her hair. Or the making of you, she replied, and felt him smile. They did not complete the bond that night, but they held each other, learning the shape and warmth of each other's bodies, sharing kisses and whispered confessions, until exhaustion finally claimed them both. For the first time in her life, Nora fell asleep feeling protected, feeling wanted, feeling like maybe, just maybe, she might actually matter after all. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Nora trained with her wolf daily, learning to shift smoothly, to run through the mountain forests, to hunt and fight and embrace the predator she had always been meant to be. Kieran was often with her, guiding her, protecting her, though his duties as king frequently pulled him away. The council eventually accepted the situation, though not without grumbling. The discovery of her royal bloodline helped, as did the obvious devotion of the king's wolves. Slowly, grudgingly, the palace began to treat her as someone who belonged rather than an interloper. Vivian remained a problem. She circulated rumors, made subtle threats, tried to undermine Nora's position at every opportunity. But without the king's favor, her influence was limited. Margaret became Nora's closest ally, teaching her court etiquette and politics, preparing her for the role she would eventually fill. Cassandra continued researching, uncovering more information about the Silver Moon Pack and their ancient powers. And through it all, the mate bond between Nora and Kieran grew stronger. They spent every possible moment together, learning each other's histories and hopes, building something that felt real and lasting despite its unusual beginning. 2 months after the selection ceremony, Kieran called another gathering in the Great Hall. This time, there was no uncertainty about why Nora stood beside him. Today, he announced to the assembled crowd, we formalize what the wolves recognized from the beginning. Lady Nora Bennett, last descendant of the Silver Moon royal line, will become my queen. Not through a selection ceremony, but through the mate bond the fates have chosen to honor. Applause followed, genuine from some quarters, forced from others. Vivienne was notably absent, having left court the previous week, under mysterious circumstances. Rumor said she had attempted one final plot against Nora and been caught. Nora never learned the full truth, and she decided she did not need to. Some things were better left in the past. The bonding ceremony was simple, but profound. Under the full moon, with witnesses from all territories present, Nora and Kieran completed the mate bond. The magic that flowed between them was visible, golden light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. When it finished, Nora felt different. Stronger, more complete, like a puzzle piece finally finding its proper place. "My queen," Kieran murmured against her lips. "My mate," she replied. "My choice." The crowd celebrated long into the night, but eventually Nora and Kieran slipped away, finding privacy in their chambers. The three wolves remained outside, standing guard, ensuring no interruptions. "Are you happy?" Kieran asked, pulling her close. "I am," Nora said, and realized it was true. She had never expected happiness, never allowed herself to hope for it. But here it was anyway, solid and real, and hers. "Good." He kissed her, slow and deep. "Because I intend to spend the rest of my life ensuring you stay that way." Outside, the palace settled into sleep. In the servants' quarters, someone told the story of the selection ceremony, how the wolves had ignored every eligible she-wolf and chosen the invisible Omega instead. It would become legend eventually, the tale of the king who let his wolves choose his queen, the Omega who turned out to be royalty, the mate bond that defied all expectations. But that night, none of them knew they were becoming legend. They only knew they had found each other against impossible odds, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the wolves knew better than anyone what was truly meant to be. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming?